So yeah, if CSIRTs are the knights, CTI is the queen, is our talk. If I can figure out how to make this work. Hey, there we are.
There we go. Okay, so good morning. Just a quick overview. We're going to talk quickly who we are, then setting the scene, as Patrick was saying, chess play, battlefields, and these kinds of things. Then we're going to look a bit at CSIRT dynamics, CTI dynamics. And then one of the issues that I have is Asger is very mean to me. And so we're trying to find a common ground that we can sort of get nearer to each other. And having said that, we'll sort of go over the points that we've seen this morning. So
first of all, my name is Asger Strunk. I work for InfoGuard, and I worked in incident response since 2015-ish.
My name is David. I get to play the Queens today. I'm also at InfoGuard. I'm a senior threat analyst and been working at CTI since 2016, previously for the government, and now in the private sector since 2021.
Hey. So if we start off by setting the scene, you could think of cybersecurity as a confrontation between adversaries. This really doesn't work very well. Which way should I point it? There we go. So we could think of it as incident as battles and networks as battlefields.
So having said that, the idea here is looking at dynamics. I'm not too much for military thought and military vocabulary in cybersecurity, but it's a way of thinking about things. So if we think about incidents really as battles and networks as battlefields, we can think about it in different ways and maybe use some of the knowledge that has been produced elsewhere to sort of think about how we're thinking about collaboration between CTI and CSIRTs. So having said that, how can a CTI team actually support the CSIRT when they go into the battle?
Hey, too far. There we go.
So one of the, just to, again, sort of setting the scene, we're talking about a commercial or national CSIRT. We're not the national CSIRT, but we're a commercial CSIRT, and the similarities between the two are actually that when the CSIRT gets to a network, they're on an unknown battlefield. The adversary has decided to attack somebody. They call Asger and the CSIRT team, and Asger and the CSIRT team arrive on an unknown battlefield with an unknown adversary where they need to quickly understand what is going on. So that's maybe a bit different if you're a CSIRT in your own network where you know where you can prepare the battlefield, you know the advantage or the attack will take place there.
Yeah. So if we quickly look at an incident can be seen as an OODA loop where everything we get in, we need to quickly observe and figure out what to do with. And in an incident, those OODA loops is a sprint.
So again, here is really the way of thinking is the CSIRT arrives on an unknown battlefield. The adversary is there, has an intent, has deployed, has tooling, and wants to achieve an objective if it's not already too late. And when the CSIRT arrives, has to quickly get into that OODA loop and actually get that smaller OODA loop than the attacker to prevent any further damage.
So if we go through the whole an incident and where the different momentums are in an incident, we can then start to describe what the needs are. So in the first stage, that's the boots on the ground. You get the initial call with the client. You need to figure out what they're saying. They give you scattered information. They see something blinking over there and something blinking over there. And you need to get some visibility. That we say this is where you need to get the drones in the air, but that means that could be either rolling out your XDR tool, getting access to the CM system, or getting Velociraptor rolled out, just to figure out how can I help them as fast as possible, and maybe identify the attacker. In a ransomware case, it's really easy to identify it because often you get a ransom note, you see who it is, and then you know who you're up against. In other cases, it could be business email compromise, and you don't know how they got in. It could be that it's from a stealer log. Then you have to figure out what the stealer is, what capabilities there are. So a little bit scattered. The next one, once you start having the visibility, start rolling out Velociraptor or getting access to CMs or whatever, you can start tracking the adversary, and maybe start securing the perimeter. And that is essentially changing the battlefield. So you are trying to take control of the battlefield that the adversary is already on, and from there work out.
I think also one advantage that the CSIRT has is if you're able to talk with the victim, and the victim has the capacity and capability to deploy or change the network. For example, in ransomware cases, maybe limit the outgoing or segment the network to places. Yeah. So that's an advantage that...
Or change the password of a user if it's a business email compromise. Those kind of things where you essentially hinder the adversary from doing different things. That's where we, as the incident responder, might have a lot of different artifacts. We can't really figure out how to put it all together. And we need to have those kind of shower thoughts and see, oh, maybe we need to look over there or over there. And that's usually in traditional IR. That's where we call CTI and say, could you maybe help and be like a sparring partner for us, where we can retell the story for us.
And I think we want to go, how can we help, we as the CTI, support the CSIRT before this point in the complex cases. I think also these complex cases, it's not ransomware cases where I get called by Asger and the CSIRT team. It's more complex where things don't add up.
Yeah. I haven't figured out where to point it. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Can I have that one?
Right.
I'll try my luck with it. So, Queens study the battles. The idea here, we've talked about it yesterday and this morning a bit. Queens, or the CTI teams, are actually the support elements. I tend to like Joe's definition, the fundamental of goal, because of threat intelligence is for an organization to prepare for, defend, or defend against an event or attack which it has not already been victim of, or identify an intrusion which may have otherwise gone unnoticed. Here, in comparison with the CSIRT has had a trigger alert, and they're flying in very quickly to understand what is going on, whereas if we look at the goal of threat intelligence, is actually to prevent that part of happening. So to do that, we've seen it again over the past few days, we do lots of different things from different sources. So we can get really good information from a CSIRT report because we have lots of indicators. We know the granularity, we know the victim network, we know who the victim is. Hopefully, quite quickly, we know who the adversary is, the tooling, whatever the TTPs. We get lots of good data out of those CSIRT cases. So that's one type of source. Then we also have maybe a blog post or a third-party reporting, but typically we don't get who the victim is, neither any specificities from the victim network. We might get some TTPs, maybe it was this kind of APT or this kind of group, but not much more, maybe a bit of tooling. So the data there is already a bit more succinct and not as much. Again, exploit alerts, we might get the POC, like the Palo Alto POC that came out yesterday. We know a bit more, but who is behind it? Who are they targeting? For the time being, it's very scant information. Then, depending on the way that your CTI team is built up, you might be doing researching and hunting or tracking adversaries. Camille did a very good presentation on tracking C2 infrastructure yesterday. But again, that's outside. You get some information, and it depends also if you have the resources in your CTI team or in your company to actually do that. So having all those different sources of information, it's a very simplistic view, please excuse me, but we still add another element when we do CTI, typically the context. What context are we moving in? Where is the victim? Is there a geopolitical tension, or is the victim in a vertical that is very, very interesting for some kind of attacker? So we try to, as Queens, we try to look at all that threat landscape, try to mix it up, and how do we do that? So you can choose your poison. You can use the diamond model. There are lots of good models. You can use the MITRE attack with the TTPs. You can go back to basic pyramid of pains and clustering artifacts. In any case, what you want to do is do it in any reproducible methodology. It's not here the case to sort of say which one is better, but what we try to do is to cluster that information, make sense out of the world that we're moving in. And again, if you have a CSIRT and a commercial CSIRT, you get really good information from successful attacks because you know what defenses were evaded, how the persistence was created, lots of good information. So that brings me to the point that me as a queen, I'm very, very hungry for incident information.
Yeah, and us as the Knights, we often look at the CTI team as the ones that we don't really know what they're doing. They're just sitting up there. We give them a lot of information, but we never really hear anything back. Yeah. And then when they send us something, we get a wall of text. We get a lot of things. And we don't have time for that. Whenever I ask for something, I want it short, I want it clean, I want something that I can use right now, right then.
So one way of thinking about this, and I'm actually an anthropologist by trade, is using a guy or an anthropologist called Marcel Mauss, who was late 19th, beginning 20th century. He did a comparison about gift giving in quote-unquote archaic societies. And the idea here is when you give a gift, there's some kind of reciprocity. And what we have currently is at the beginning of incidents, typically, or what we see is CSIRTs are complaining that they're not getting the information or valuable information for them in the format that they need. So how can we get around that problem?
So if we go back to the incident moments that I just spoke about, we started iterating over how can CTI come in on an earlier stage instead of when it gets a little bit more complex, when we need to have like a sparring partner. So if we divide it up into 3 different groups, maybe we can have them accelerate that OODA loop by giving us information earlier than we had before, and maybe try to figure out what kind of information we can get earlier than that.
Here, for example, as we see at the boots on the ground in securing and tracking, the attention, the concentration goes very quickly up high. The CSIRT is focused. So when I start calling the CSIRT when they're on a very new case, during that moment, that's not a good moment to call them. Asger will say, call me later, I don't have time for you. So knowing how to communicate at that moment with the CSIRT is important. And as Asger was saying, so how can we actually accelerate the OODA loop? And one of the issues that we've sort of identified is on the boots on the ground, typically you have to coach and explain. The victim calls up, hey, I've been hit, I don't know. The ransomware cases, baby gets a note. Who is this? What am I supposed to do? I need to brief my management. And here, for example, a quick overview of who the threat actor is, and not a love letter to a threat actor, but something quick and short that the CSIRT can sort of shove off or shift, send to the customer, is something that they can give, and the customer, the CSIRT, that can then go back to deploying on the network, getting that visibility, and start to the securing and tracking. And then during the securing and tracking moment, securing and tracking moment, we also have the CSIRT needs to quickly deploy queries and find where the adversary is in. And here again, what type of information could you need?
Yeah, probably a quick list of whatever paths that's been seen by the attack group the last 10 cases or 5 cases, something that's really quick and easy to read. I don't want to have an IOC list that's 20 pages long where the IOCs are from 2020 because I can't really use that for anything good. Sometimes it works, often it doesn't. So I would rather have something where I know, oh yeah, they use this kind of staging gear and they use this kind of tooling, quick and easy.
So we're going to focus a bit more on the next few slides on accelerating the OODA loop, because the research, just take some time out for the research and resources, is when the case gets more complex. As we said, this is sort of the typical moment that the CTI team or the CSIRT team calls out to the CTI team. Here, as the tension gets lower, it's also a moment where the CSIRT, we're a small team in the CTI, so we can't follow all the cases. But if the CSIRT calls us up and start briefing us, hey, we've got case, blah, 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 I've seen this and this, but it's not matching up, But just the exercise of having the CSIRT incident responder sort of trying to make sense of what they've seen to an outside person who's not been in the case, just trying to make that sense is already very good exercise on the one hand. Then we have the possibility the CTI team should be knowing what is going on in the threat landscape, so it's a sparring partner who is coming outside. So having that exercise and that exchange, I'd say more on an oral basis, so a discussion, not chatting, can be very helpful also. Then we also have dispatching resources, maybe artifacts that are outside of the network, the C2 infrastructure, depending on the capacity of your CTI team. The CSIRT can say, hey, we need to concentrate on what's inside the network perimeter of the victim. Please go out and find, if you can find any elements on the infrastructure, maybe share that information.
Yeah. It could also be some kind of reversing, so maybe having different samples, trying to compare the samples and see if there's a common thing, a commonality. That's also included in that.
And one thing that maybe the CTI team would like from the CSIRT is when they're discussing with the client, we don't want to multiply the channels of communication. So if I call up a victim where the CSIRT is functioning during an incident, it's a bit awkward for, hey, so I'm the threat analyst, I don't know exactly what's going on, can you tell me? It's a bit of an awkward call. So we want to keep it a single point of contact. So the CSIRT, when they're discussing with the customer, and it gets a bit more complex, how can I share it? Yeah. Can I share it with third parties? Can I share it maybe with the national CSIRT? What is the TLP or the PAP classification that we can actually use to do the research? So this is something the CSIRT should actually clear out for the CTI team so they can hand it off and the CTI can get started without needing to think, oh, who can I share it with, under what classification, and go back to the CSIRT who is still concentrated on securing and tracking the adversary.
So with that said, change. Finding the common grounds in all of the blabber that we just said is first of all defining the different expectations from us as the CSIRT, but also the CTI team. What do we want from each other? The next thing is us as a team in general. We're not that large to have like SLAs because that wouldn't make any sense if it's a 5-man team trying to talk to each other. Not really, but maybe better having a service catalog. Again, what kind of specific gifts can I take from one and give to another?
I think here, the idea is to create a virtuous cycle of gift exchange. So not just having the CSIRT drooling, the CTI team drooling for the CSIRT saying, hey, the ivory tower, the queens never give me anything back.
Yeah.
So how do we think about it?
So what we were thinking about, making it like a cyclic thing. So whenever we have an incident, we need to figure out how to feed those kind of artifacts, let's call it that, into a database that a CTI analyst can take and have a look at and verify and put into their database. It could be the same database, just structured in different ways. And there, by having that, we can first of all have like a 4-eye principle where somebody's actually verifying what we are finding and making sure that it's good artifacts and then pumping it back into us.
So the idea, so we thought about calling it the TAR dashboard for tar and feathers, but also the threat actor resume, because we want to keep it short. Probably better names out there, but this is what we came up. If you look at it, the top 3 sectors, sort of executive summary, objectives, and sectors. The idea here is during the boots on the ground, this is the information that you don't want to give a 26-page threat actor report to a customer who has lots of other things doing because there's a going on incident, but give them sufficient information that they can orient and brief their company on what is going on, what are the next steps that are needed. So the first 3 elements are really for the securing the boots on the ground.
Yeah. And the lower sector, the lower sector is probably more for us as the incident responders. So dirty TTPs, you can essentially call the whole section for dirty TTPs or dirty artifacts that's given to us. But the dirty TTPs are not all of the TTPs used by the threat actors, but at least the last 10 cases or 5 cases that we've seen with this threat actor, because that's the let's call it the trending TTPs right now in that group. And that's also the most interesting for us. The same with the tooling. What kind of tools do they use right now? Could be that they're shifting from advanced IP scanner to something else. And therefore, we need to go look for that specific tool. initial access trends, we all know it's usually VPN or an exploit, but it's still good to know where to start the hunting for that. And again, exfil destinations. Do we need to look for Mega or do we need to look for rclone? That's the at least where to start. So things that can give us some quick wins and low-hanging fruits in our early investigation.
I think here again we need to take into account it won't be perfect. Again, we're thinking about accelerating the OODA loop. So where to kickstart the tracking, and so we might be wrong. The CTI team, that's part of our job, to make hypotheses, try to cluster things in an unknown environment. The CSIRT has to be more not very error avoiding. But at the same time, if we can give them some elements that can speed up their hunting and tracking of the adversary and the victim network, that can be very helpful. Yeah. We're also calling it a dashboard because we don't want to have it fixed. We don't want to have a PDF. We'd like to pull out the PDF when we need it, but we need something that is rendered continuously. So if you have multiple CTI or multiple incident responders, multiple incidents going on, you want that information coming in. Maybe if a new one comes in, that you already have that information. Another element is here is, as Asger was saying, these dirty TTPs, tooling initial access tools, they're actually, we can maybe think about it, say, the last 5 cases, or maybe over the last 6 months, depending how many repeated actors you see in your domain, or your sort of in the kingdom, if we go back to the original Knights and Queens. But the idea is here is sort of having a moving window and not going back 2 years. Another element, or...
Yeah. Another element of feeding that into the CTI is that the CTI can also use that for other products. So, for example, the executive summary doesn't have to be in our incident cases. It could also be giving to other instances. So whenever somebody has the request of, could you please give me a quick summary of APT XYZ, then you already have that as a thing on the shelf to take out and give right away as a product.
Yeah, the executive summary, you could use, it's actually the executive summary of another CTI product. It would be, for example, a page or a research paper on this or that adversary. What we also see is that we could reuse it, or the CSIRT could use, we're now focusing more on incidents, but the executive summary could also be used by the CSIRT when they're doing their case reporting. And it can actually become a very, really nice source for CTI teams. If the CSIRT is doing the reporting 1-2 weeks or whatever time after the incident, and sort of go copy-paste the executive summary, and it's like, this is wrong, we actually saw something else. Well, they can ping that back to the CTI team, and they're like, you're wrong there. And so we can update the threat actor model and the profiling of that threat actor. So here again, the idea is to say lean and mean, and use the information that we're actually using for other CTI products. It could also be the IOCs or things you're feeding to your SOC. What we're just doing is we're just compacting and taking the latest elements and giving that to sort of boost the OODA loop during an incident to the CTI teams. But there are some challenges.
Hey. So the challenges that we have, of course, right now is how do we, in an incident moment, pump those things into a database. We haven't figured it out completely yet, but it could be whatever tooling you're using. Maybe in our case, it could be Splunk that we just pump into an extra database somewhere or index. And the same thing the other way around. How do we get the feedback?
I think another element that we sort of discussed, I think we can point to the next slide because it's just the 3 points, is sort of, as Asger was saying, is what elements do we want? The CTI team, we're small. We can't go through all the dumps of the information. We'd like a selected, filtered part. So how do you guys do actually the filtering of that, what you were just saying? Another question was when. So discussing this previously, we're thinking, oh, we could just wait till the CSIRT finishes the report. But that's a time lag of maybe 1 week, 2 weeks, depending on the threat actor activity and the number of incidents they're responding to. That sucks for my SOC clients because the value of the IOCs is going down very quickly time-wise. So again here, when do we wait till the report? That doesn't seem like a good idea. But then during the incident, is it a continuous flow with possible false positives? And then, as Asger was saying, we use the 4I principle. The CSIRT is filtering, but before it gets pumped out later on, well, a CTI analyst has to go over it, checks it again. Is it true or not? That's one possibility. And finally, is the how. How do we pump it through on a continuous manner?
Yeah, it has to be implemented in the tooling that we use day to day, so we don't have to have that extra step. That's a requirement from my side. And you have the same requirement that it has to be included already in the ways that we work, otherwise it's not going to work. And that's a hurdle that we need to figure out. So, to conclude, the CSIRTs are very incident-focused, and the CTI teams are very threat landscape-focused. Usually in incidents, it's very high-paced, and it requires a lot of concentrations, and therefore it's hard to get that CTI angle in right away. And yeah, CTI teams are usually often interested in getting that information right away.
So I think managing expectations and exchanging resources are crucial for blue teams. Where we don't have unlimited resources, so we have to stay lean and mean, and trying to get a kind of reciprocity going on that we're working together is very important. So it might seem easy, but by streaming a data pipeline, the CTI can support the incident process and the OODA loop sprint. I think this is sort of the message we want to get through. It might seem easy to think about. We're like, this is rather simple, but implementing it is still a bit of a challenge. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. So, but the end conclusion is that we always strive to protect our customers and constituents. That's the end result we hope to get.
We're on the same team.
Yeah. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.